It's five after. We can go ahead and get started if you two are ready.
Ready?
Yeah, ready.
Okay. Well, usual format, names, pronouns, icebreaker. The icebreaker for today will be, since it obviously comes up throughout the story, if you could learn any language, which language would you choose? And of course, I will go first. My name is Jonathan. Pronouns are he, him. And this kind of ties back to our bucket list question from last month's meeting. One thing I am like determined to do before the end of my life is learn sign language, in particular, of course, ASL. But it's just a language that really interests me. And I've had some instances where I've interacted with people who are deaf. And of course, we have made communication work one way or another. But it just would have been so nice if I had the tools or the skills to communicate with them in their own way, as opposed to forcing them to communicate with me in my way. Um, and I don't know, whenever I have those kind of interactions, I feel kind of selfish. It feels kind of cruel to expect them to understand me, but not vice versa. So, yeah, that's my language, ASL. What about you guys?
See, my name is Grace Bonwood. My pronouns are they, them, and I would say it's a toss-up between the Dene language, also known as like the Navajo language, or a Spanish. And I'm teaching myself Spanish right now. I have been for the past 3 years, and so I can read it better than I can speak it right now. And but I think just the Dene language because it's so different. And my partner, he was working up on a fire on the Navajo Nation recently, and I got a hat that said Ayani, I think it's Ananishni, which means I love you in Dene. And the language just is really, really different than anything that I've ever studied. Um, and when I was watching this TV show, I think it was called like Wind Walkers or something like that. A lot of the actors were Dene and spoke their native tongue. So um I was always been very intrigued. But yeah, it was a Spanish or Dene for me.
Okay, you guys have such interesting answers, and my answer was just gonna be like Mandarin, just for the convenience and for the wide reach, or something like Latin, so I could be pretentious and be like, "Oh, ho, ho, I'm so smart," like something like that. But yeah, Latin or Mandarin, those two are probably the top two I thought of.
Nice. And I would say, Arian, I don't think Mandarin is nothing. If I'm not mistaken, isn't that like one of the harder Asian languages, Mandarin? Or is that Japanese?
Uh, no, it definitely is one of the harder languages, but I figured it was so common of a thing that you know.
That way when you watch Firefly, you'll understand everything that they're saying too.
Nice.
Ooh, what's Firefly?
Oh, it's that sci-fi like fantasy like cowboy show from the early 2000s, and they speak a lot of Mandarin in there because I guess like the futuristic timeline is that the um essentially that the Mandarin is one of the more common languages spoken in English. So um I don't know the other way to describe that show. It was kind of like
It's
along
okay, I could
the same.
just look it up.
Yeah. You might it's only to be prepared though, it's only one season because then it got canceled, but it's kind of like a cult
Damn.
classic. Yeah.
Okay, but it sounds interesting though.
Yeah. So it was one of my favorites growing up for sure.
It's always your favorites that get canceled. Damn.
Tell me about it. Okay, well, I will start us off by asking, what did you both think of this month's book?
For me, it was like reading long form poetry. Uh, it was really, I think in the Discord I said like raw. It felt so realistic about all the things that happen to a human that are too embarrassing or maybe like too gross to talk about. And just I think it made it all really holistic and visceral. It also made me realize it's funny. So having, an AFAB experience, but being non-binary, and then sometimes when I read books that, talk about women in their adolescence, I just laugh so much because I was like, man, I've been gay the whole time. Because it's like these stories that I really love, but it was like really hard to relate to because of like, oh yeah, I guess young girls do that stuff. And I was just kind of like never could understand. It was just kind of fun to be in that world a little bit more. And I really liked it, but I also like it was also kind of more like an experience for me. And I wouldn't say it was like the best thing I've ever read, but it was such an experience. It's like watching a really sad, like raw movie that you never need to watch again, but you're kind of grateful to have been a part of it, is kind of how I felt.
It being long form poetry actually goes hard. Like that describes it so well. Yeah, I also mentioned it in the Discord. How I love the prose. Like I really loved it. Anyway, yeah, when I first started reading it, it was like instant, what do you call it? The word, recognition, I guess. I could instantly relate to the characters. I don't know if that's good or bad because they were describing, it was kind of giving like almost cocky with the way they were describing Yuki and Mei and stuff like that. But yeah, living abroad for most of my life in like Western areas. I grew up in Canada and then now I'm in Australia. Um, I I kind of, you know, I get a lot of what the book was saying. Um, finding your culture, heritage, kind of chipping away at yourself, stuff like that. And she described it in such a way that, yeah, it was so accurate, but so colorful as well at the same time. It was definitely one of the better books I've read so far. Um, yeah, I loved it.
Nice. Well, I'll also say I really, really enjoyed this book. Kind of like Arian said, I was almost a bit surprised how much from the very beginning I was enjoying it. Um, Something about just the way the author wrote this story just made it really connect, even though, of course, I don't have the experience of growing up as a young woman, nor do I have the experience of being mixed race or being Asian. Just a lot of it just felt so relatable. It just, I don't know. The author did a really, really good job writing the story. Um, I also really enjoyed I guess you would call it a mystery, the way in which we're told from the book's description that all of these three women's stories connect, but we're not told how. Um, I found myself constantly with each chapter questioning how and like trying to dissect certain hints at other characters, which we'll talk about. I'm curious how everybody thought these girls were going to connect, but um, and then the way it ends, the connection is told to us, I thought was very interesting. I also loved how the author just like chose to wait for so long to finally give us all of the story. Um, that's just like a very, very common thing to do to keep readers keep reading. Because I think if it was given to me in the very beginning, I probably wouldn't have been as interested, but good on the author for kind of hiding their hand for a while. Um, Also, like I've said before with other books, I am a sucker for a beautiful cover, and this cover to me is so pretty. It made me want to read it. Maybe it's bad to say, but I have always judged books by their cover, even as a child. So I'm glad that she chose such a beautiful cover. And that, of course, applies to books, not people. But um, okay. Since this book features three different point of views, I'm curious, what was everyone's favorite point of view?
No, man, that's tough because I felt like I liked Haruka's point of view in the beginning more than like her adulthood, and then I felt more sometimes connected to May's point of view, and like her adulthood. And um, I just think I just really liked the independent side of um Ruga, and I don't know, just like running around looking underneath like logs and just really having such a wonderful time like outside and just being young and not having to worry about anything quite yet, and just cutting her hair short, and so I think that I probably like that point of view just because I can probably relate to that point of view like a little bit more. And I found her entire story like so interesting and extremely intriguing.
Okay, same, because uh, I love each like each narrator for different reasons. Because May, I loved her for the romance. Well, you could say quotation mark romance, but it was there. Between her and Bran, I ate it up in the beginning, and the unrequited love, delicious. For Yuki, it was like the reality, or the more kind of Asian identity aspect. And it was sad, like it was a tragedy. And for Haruka, I didn't like it at first because you know, like I liked what it did for the story overall, but like at the start, when I first read Haruka, I was, because I was already so used to Mei and Yuki, but I ended up liking it more, or the best, I think, because it was more interesting to me, I think, just reading about, um, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of you guys. I think um, the author did a really, really good job of crafting so much individuality into each character. Their stories genuinely do feel vastly different. Um, and we only have read one story that's told in multiple point of views. Aaron, you'll probably remember um, The Emperor and the Endless Palace. And this book does it way better. That story struggled with the perspectives all feeling too similar and running together. This one shines because it is so different. Um, I will say, like you all said, I did like May's. I did not like the quote unquote romance between May and Fran. Obviously, from the beginning, I was like, girl, fuck Fran. Like, move on, find someone who loves you. But, she had to experience those things. I get it. For Haruka, I wasn't really connecting with her in the beginning when she was a child. I more latched onto her story as she grew older. I do have to give the author props, however, for her ability to write a character whose storyline revolves around her being a sex worker and being able to tell that story with such brutal honesty that I think, at least in today's media, when we discuss sex workers, movies, television, books, it almost seems as if we are glamorizing it, whereas this author really chooses to focus on just like the stark reality of it. Um, Haruka is definitely not a pretty woman. Uh, I'm obviously talking about the 90s movie Pretty Woman. She definitely is not living that kind of life. So I have to give the author props for that. Uh, I will say, however, I did land on my favorite being Yuki. I think just as someone who was married and then divorced, I related to her story so much, um, which kind of disappointed me towards the end. We kind of lose Yuki's perspective as we move into getting more of Mei and Haruka's perspective, but hers for a long time was my favorite. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about each character, starting with the order they're introduced. Mei. General thoughts on Mei as a character in this story.
Yeah, May's character was so relatable when it came to like being queer but and like not having a place for those feelings and absolutely no one around everything just being so heteronormative that everything around you like like her experience was so real and the way that the author described like like I've always liked girls but then like still like dating like men, but then also not really being interested at all, but feeling like you have to be interested, and then just like obsessed with Fran. And then also it's like one of those things where it's like, are you actually in love with Fran or do you want to be Fran because of the proximity to whiteness and like how like May was just always talking about that. And then the end of the book, how she was like, I didn't even realize I was like dimming my shine to try to fit into these white spaces and being embarrassed and like just all like the microaggressions and the micro racism from and the macro that would happen to her throughout the book that she would just have to brush off and like all of her friends would brush off. I just Man, so like growing up, I consider myself, like pansexual. So I've always been really open with like my sexuality, even though I came from a very interesting background of like the Midwest and an evangelical type of background. But I've always kind of been like I don't give a hoot kind of situation, but everyone around me did. And so there was a lot of times when I would date a Fran or try to, and then be rejected just on the idea of like those young women having to deal with the fact that they found me attractive and not having a place for that, and then getting mad at me for those feelings, and then like cutting off a friendship because or like a relationship because they couldn't deal with their own queerness yet. Spoiler alert, a lot of the people that I used to try to date when I was like 14, 15, and 16, they're gay. But so, like being yourself early, and having to kind of wait for people to catch up is like a really hard feeling, I think, especially in spaces that are not meant for that. And so then you do kind of dim your shine. And I think everyone in adolescence has been there before. And that's something that I could 100% relate to is that you have to get um, wise enough or old enough to say, fuck Fran, right? Like she finally did when she was like, okay, I'm walking away, like, fuck Fran. Um, and I think that's really hard to do sometimes because you're letting go of like different things and not just like the person. And so like I just was really, yeah, every time I was reading a story and I was like, yep, been there. Yep, totally. Because it was just really raw and like really real about the things that like would happen for sure.
Okay. Um, bless her sapphic heart. Like honestly, like uh yeah, I saw a lot of myself in May. I saw her at like being mature at such a young age and having such a self-awareness, but then growing up and then having or being, I guess, just more childish and raw. Mm, yeah, you know how she would chip away at herself and just you know, mold herself and try to uh, be as white as she can be due to her environment and stuff like that. Uh, yeah. Can we talk about relatable? Yeah. Um, the fact that she was, rich, I feel like there were some times where it added like some edge to her, I guess, but they never really leaned into that. I think the furthest they leaned into that was really just at moments with her father. Or what stuck out to me was like when they were at dinner time and they were just stealing reservations. Like that was such, I don't know, that rubbed me off the wrong way. So there was that. But aside from that, I really loved her character. She was just so interesting to me. And her growth, it wasn't palpable, but in the like there was no, I guess, super while I was reading it, there was no super distinct moment. Or if there was, then I just yeah. But from the start to the end, there was like no mm, super distinct shift, I guess. Like just at the end, you could feel that she's changed. And I really love when that happens. Like that is such solid character growth for me. Um, yeah, nothing that Grace hasn't already said. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, May, there's so much I can say about May, but I will first say the thought running through my mind every single time I read May's perspective is I really wish she would just like discover Chapel Roan, listen to Good Luck Babe, and like move on. And that song was like playing in my head every single time we got moments between her and Fran because like she totally embodies those lyrics. Um, and I do believe Fran is going to wake up one night and just be someone's wife and like miss May, but whatever. Um, I will also agree with Arian. I think that May had the most character growth for me. Maybe that's because we get the story through most of the book is, I believe, told through her perspective, but I think she is a totally different person um, at the end than she was from the beginning. I also reading May's perspective makes me kind of happy the way I grew up. I'm glad I did not grow up in an environment where I was surrounded by whiteness. My environment was actually quite the opposite. I'm also glad I've never fallen for a straight guy um, because this makes it sound like torture. But and their perspective, May's perspective, reminds me a lot of when we read I Feed Her to the Beast a few months back. This story about a queer woman loving her straight best friend and like what that looks like. And I'm just always reminded of how many times I have talked to my queer female friends and they've told me very similar stories to May's story. And I'm just always so perhaps baffled by how common this kind of story is between uh, in female friendships. I think it stems from the fact that women are oftentimes conditioned to be codependent. So a lot of their friendships and relationships are birthed out of codependency, and I think the the bond between two codependent people can oftentimes feel romantic. So, like Grace was saying, I'm not totally sure if May actually loved Fran or if it was just her constant need for Fran and her need to be in close proximity to Fran's whiteness. Um, I would have perhaps, now that Grace mentions it, I would have loved to have that explored a little bit more in this story. Um, so, yeah. All I can say to May is just like, thank God you moved on before you spent like your entire adulthood being caught up on this straight girl. But um, next, let's talk about Yuki. General thoughts on Yuki as a character.
What a tragedy. It was like um I felt myself being like, no, no, you're 19. Gross, 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 gross. With like the adult in the room that ended up being like her husband, who should have obviously been like, no, this is gross. I'm not doing that. Um, yeah, it was, obviously like Yuki came from like a really small background, like not a lot of like knowledge, wanted to be something, like different. And we got to know later on, we realized that it was her father, right? His grandfather, that he's distant, right? Like just like his personality and like the farm, and then kind of being in the ooh, bright, shiny lights like place somewhere different. Um, and then seeing someone that you're like instantly attracted to, right? For who knows what reason, and that the adult in the room should have been a better person, and then just like sometimes I feel like this book this book should have been called Mongrel hashtag men are the problem because um the whole time I was just like ew, but I've experienced like all of these things. Every single thing that has happened to everybody in this book, like, has happened to me in some form or another. Like, weird glances, being weirdly called upon when you're like 11 years old walking down the street, and it's like 30-year-old men that are like hooting at you, and you're just like, I'm obviously 11 years old. Or, just all these things that happen to Yuki, and it was just like tragedy, tragedy, tragedy. Is just because no one was there to give Yuki good advice. No one was there to be like, "Hey, no." And the only people that wanted to give Yuki advice was people that wanted to take advantage of her. And then she like lost the whole point of like the thing that brought her so much joy, was like her music. And it's just like these insidious, like, I don't know, these insidious men just kept coming in and wanted to like take the light that they saw from someone and use it for themselves, and then just chuck it in like the bin. And it just happened so much that eventually Yuki lost like her life over it. Um, and yeah, I know there's like that TikTok that came out a long time ago. It was like, "Grandma, you little victim." Like when people are trying to like spin like all of their like grandma's stories, and you like hear them out loud and you're like, "Oh my gosh, ew, ew, ew. That's like so awful. Why?" And yeah, at every turn with Yuki, I was like, "Oh no. I feel like, you have postpartum depression and no one cares. You're now just like this like little trophy wife thing that's got like tossed away for the younger model." And it was just like absolutely crazy the whole time. Where like she felt crazy, but she wasn't crazy. Um, the gaslighting. But yeah, so Yuki's story was just so like, I think, relatable too, from a lot of people, maybe not in our family, but people that we know as like grandmothers, who you're like, oh boy, when they tell you about how they met their husbands, or something along those lines.
Tragedy was right. Like it was so heartbreaking. Um, I feel like her story, or like she had the most promise because, they sent her abroad, they had her dreams. It was all right there for ready for the taking. And then here comes a man, right? Like, I really wanted to believe, but when I first started out, like, oh my gosh, she has a romantic interest, a little guy. And then when they revealed that he was older than her by at least a decade, my heart dropped because I knew what was coming. And damn. It really came. I hate Alex with I hate him. I hate him so bad. And yeah, the gaslighting, when Yuki saw it coming a mile away, I felt that because I don't know. Sometimes you could just feel it in your gut. Like the intuition is real. I okay. When she was confident. She really came off as, strut in her stuff. One thing that stuck with me when reading her story, when she felt so assured when men desired her, and that could be because her father was distant and stuff like that. But anyway, when she felt so assured that men wanted her, I was like, damn, relatable, right? True. And then the jealousy and anger at someone being younger than them, more successful than them. Yeah, um, being just more desirable than them. Damn, it's real, and that's crazy because I'm like only 21. So at the fact that I'm already like, oh my gosh, he's so much younger than me. He's so much younger than me. They have so much time. Yeah, I grapple with a lot of jealousy, and I'm working with that. But with Yuki, uh, yeah, real. And then through the later stages of her life, the studies that she did, that she gave Haruka, it was so heartbreaking. The reveal, well, I kind of not really a reveal, but they alluded to it. I was like, God. It was so crazy. It was so heartbreaking. And when things were looking up for her, of course, that's when she dies. Of course, that's when she dies. Um, but yeah, so much tragedy happened to her. It was heartbreaking. I really wanted um, it to end well for her, but it didn't. Um, yeah. And the way her dreams were shelved as well. Yeah.
Yeah, like you guys said, the only way to really describe Haruka's story is like heartbreaking. Um, Reading her story reminds me heavily of the first, I believe it's the first line in the Feminist Manifesto. I'm sorry, Feminist Manifesto, the Feminine Mystique, is that everyone has used a woman before. And it's so prevalent throughout her story. Everyone uses Yuki in some way or another. And it's just it's so sad. And I've had so many friends who are women who have gone through so many similar things. It might sound kind of cruel to say, but oftentimes my heart breaks for the moment a woman becomes a mother and becomes a wife, because that is oftentimes where her life ends and her autonomy ends. Very similar to when we read Don't Cry for Me, um, the story with Rachel, how the moment she became a mother, her life just kind of has to end. Um, yeah, such heartbreaking stuff. And again, with the mystery theme that I mentioned earlier, I was so curious how Yuki was going to die. We're told, I believe, the first like what chapter or so in May's perspective that Yuki is dead. Um, and I was like, okay, did Alex kill her? Because obviously he's this like really insidious person. Did the her ex-boyfriend kill her? Like, how did she die? Um, and of course we get her death. But yeah, such heartbreaking stuff. My heart goes out to all the Yukis of the world. uh, Next, Haruka. General thoughts on Haruka as a character in the story.
Oh, just one thing I wanted to mention, when you said Jonathan, I was like, I thought Alex was gonna kill her. Technically, Alex did kill her because May thought she was dead for like 15 years. So technically, like she died twice, which I think is very interesting now that you said that. Um, but like Haruka, man, I just like have heard so many stories just like hers from so many different like people, or just people having to turn to certain things out of desperation because there's no safety net or safeguard or help from like anybody. And then it's just so easy to make so much money being in the male gaze that it's really hard to not kind of go there. And I think that kind of comes up in the story a lot. So you have Haruka just like I feel like wouldn't have had to go there if like society wasn't like how it was, or if like, you know, she had more of a mother and like a father and didn't feel like abandoned. Because what does society tell women all the time is that they're not anything unless men find them desirable or attractive, or you can feel good about yourself, but you also need a man to like find you desirable to feel good about yourself. Um, and so that whole story, hers, I was just like, it was really wonderful to see her open up to her sister and like not compare herself to her sister's Western beauty too, because I think that came up a lot. And how at the end she was just really aligned with her sister, realizing that there was like two people that are like together, that have a piece of their mother like together, and that they could be in their womanhood together without having to have a man around to let them know that they were both beautiful, because they looked at each other and thought that in the end, and they like had each other, and about how to embrace that within each other instead of like comparing. um and so I just think that that's also really interesting, that even though like Haruka's story I think ties so well into May's, was because even though she was raised in Japan, she still had proximity to whiteness problems, where they talked about people getting like surgeries to like have their eyes like look different and stuff like that. And like how she was like jealous of her sister for being like half white, because then like she was more desirable in like her and then but in then poor May, right, was like that insidious like, oh, that like foreign beauty, but so like foreign enough to be made fun of, but then not foreign enough to like be connected to her family. And so I think Haruka's story was just so similar to May's, except for not having any money. Was like I think one of the biggest differences between their two stories. And I feel like May would have ended up just like Haruka. The situation was like reversed. And so I just really liked how that flowed throughout the story, is that they were so very different from each other, but then also so similar. And the main basis, I think, in my opinion, for their differences, honestly, was like the proximity to money, also at the same time. And we kind of get that juxtaposition too, where this whole story is just, I don't know, it was just so well like interwoven, that like Haruka's story was just, it's like tragic, but sometimes I felt like she really owned her sexuality too, though, and like owned it and then like manipulated the situation to try to come out on top the best you can in those types of situations.
Okay, real. Real. I really liked, her voice, I guess you can say that. Her voice felt younger to me somehow. I can't really put a distinct, I can't really name why, but it just did. Uh, well, when I first started reading her poem, I was trying to figure out what was her connection because, obviously, Yuki and Mei were mother and child. So I was like, what's her connection? Like, why'd we go straight to Japan? And then, you put two and two together and I was like, oh my gosh, half sisters. And then the reveal, yeah, okay. Uh, yeah. Um, damn. I liked how she was more eccentric and that kind of carried itself um over. I think there's this one specific line. Yeah, but when she was a child, she was prodding the neighborhood boys and then playing with like insects, I think if I recall correctly. And then that knowledge carried on to her adult life where she's talking about like worker ants or stuff like that. And I just found that like really cool. Uh when she was ghosted by Kay, I was like, real, because that happened to me too. So like that was so real. Um, there are many such instances, unfortunately. And if Kay was like a grown-up man, an old man, or like someone actually her age, it was never answered. But that was so real. How she took advantage or how she leveraged her appeal and how men would look at her. Um, I really like that aspect of her story. The persona she'd put on to go work at host bars or stuff like that. I feel like anyone who works at customer service would get, the feeling of just putting on like mask just to get through the day. Um, yeah. Um, mm, there was this one, let me see if I could find it, but the way that she described um taking a selfie, yeah. That naked photos were the teenage girls' love letters of today. That was low-key so real. But like, yeah. It was so funny to me because I quote, in years to come, the average student will not be studying Basho's haikus, but Haruka's hand placement and side boob. Like it's lines like that that make me love the book. It's um yeah, aside from that, I could relate with her, like the stares of grown men or like it being gross. The internet aspect, real. Um, yeah. Cause like I'm okay, online. I low-key could have been groomed, but my friend stopped me. This Discord person stopped me. It's so real. Um, yeah, I love that. What a good story. Oh, wait, and about the beauty standards, Grace brought it up, how even though she was away from whiteness, the it still affected her, the hafu. In the Philippines, that's all you see in the media. There's like three standards of beauty, the chinito or chinita and mestizo mestiza. So that's like mixed race or like European looking Filipinos. And then there's your East Asian looking Filipinos. And then there's your standard or like your quintessential Filipino, the tan skin, the wider nose, all those features. And the people that are most presented in the media or like put on a pedestal are the Chinitos and the mestizos. So the people who don't necessarily look like your average Filipino. And yeah, I just found that kind of relatable how, um, you know, there's still features and desires um, that aren't necessarily average, I guess. Yeah. Anyway.
Wow, it's interesting because it seems like you both got way more out of Haruka's perspective than I did. A lot of the things that you guys mentioned, I hadn't even thought about, but I'm glad you guys brought them up. Um, First, I will say one thing that was blaringly obvious to me when I first read Haruka's point of view, well, not first, but as we got to her adult life, is that there is a vastly different meaning of hostess in America than there is in Japan. I was assuming it was like restaurant hostess, and then we get the like sex worker stuff, and I was like, oh, what kind of hostess is this? But apparently that's what hostess in Japan means. So um yeah, that was interesting for me to read for the first time. Um Haruka, I felt so bad for her. She has almost this like youngest sibling, runt of the litter kind of vibe to her character, which is interesting because for essentially all of her adolescence, she was the only child, but she still has that in her character. Um, like we even find her seeking sisterhood in the other sex workers. There's that one woman that she becomes very close to. I can't remember her name right now, but who she looked up to. She was like this like higher class sex worker who like she considered to be like a big sister. And I found that so interesting. I would have loved way more of that. Unfortunately, my one issue with Haruka's storyline is she's such a strong character and she has so much individuality until she meets May. I feel like once her and May begin to contact one another, even via emails, she essentially just kind of becomes May's little sister, which I didn't love. I don't know if that's just me feeling that or if you guys also notice a similar thing, but I just feel like we kind of don't give her any more of her own life or her own personhood once she meets May, which I thought was interesting. But, you know, so be it. Uh, okay, I guess I will ask originally, before you obviously got to the different twists and turns throughout the story, how did you think all three women were connected?
Yeah, I honestly thought they were gonna like meet up at some retreat or something, or meet because like they're like I thought maybe like Yuki was gonna teach violin again, and then maybe like May was gonna like be there, and I thought Haruka was gonna like come over to the state, not the States, they were in Britain, but like somewhere like that. I thought they were gonna kind of like meet up, and then their stories were gonna collide, and they were gonna like help each other through all the bullshit that they've had to go through throughout their whole life. Um, and then now when I read stories, I try not to figure it out. I just kind of like turn my brain off and like try to read unless it's like really obvious. And I was actually really happy with how they're all interconnected. And I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. And how they actually only got to kind of like meet their mother and then kind of move on. But yeah, I thought it was going to be some sort of like bonding over music slash like helping each other and somehow like coming across each other and then realizing that their lives are like more interconnected.
Okay, real. Because when I don't know who came first, me or Yuki, I forgot. But um when they were talking about like violin and choir, I thought they were gonna meet up at the school. Like because they were talking about how Yuki was moving abroad and how May was already in like London or something like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna meet up, they're gonna connect, they're gonna bond over their shared ethnicity in this like predominantly white area, and it's gonna connect them, and they're gonna be like, this is gonna be a lifelong friendship type stuff like that. But then certain things were like, kind of sticking out, like why was Yuki sending letters while May was texting. And I was like, that was the first hint. I was like, oh, maybe there's something else. And I suspected that they were mothers. And then when it came, I was like, called it. It was really fun. I love when that happens when you get it right. When you um but yeah, um that's it. And then when it came to Haruka, um I was like, how did they relate to mother and daughter? And then the half sister, and I was like, oh, I probably should have seen that coming, but I didn't see it as clear as May and Yuki's. But yeah, it was I really loved the mystery aspect, like Jonathan said. Um, yeah.
Yeah, as embarrassed as I am to admit this is a book I did not guess where it was going to go with these three characters' connections. At first, I thought they were all going to be friends in some way, almost like a Sex in the City kind of thing. I remember when we are reading early on in Yuki's perspective, when she first has May, she mentions there's an Asian woman who lives across the hall from her, who is younger than her, and who seemingly wants to have some kind of connection because they're both two Asian women in like a predominantly white neighborhood. Who like who Yuki tries to avoid. I thought that was May, and maybe at some point they become friends and all the things. And then I also remember there's a point in Yuki's perspective where she mentions following a very confident younger woman in the street. I can't remember if that woman was Asian or not, but and she mentions how she is seemingly so able to attract all these men's attention and make men love her. And because we already know at that point that Haruka is a sex worker, I assumed that was Haruka. Um, but of course, I was totally wrong. Um, so, and then I thought, as it's revealed to us that Yuki is May's mother, I thought that May and Haruka are going to be partners at some point. There's an early chapter in Haruka's perspective where she mentions looking up at a billboard and seeing a hafu girl with honey blonde hair, and like that is exactly how May is described throughout most of the story. So I thought maybe May becomes a model in her adulthood, and somehow they meet. Maybe May comes to one of Haruka's clubs, and they meet that way. Especially because we're told also in a different chapter, I believe, that Haruka's has some sort of fascination with women, not necessarily sexual attraction, but a fascination. So I thought maybe she and May have a relationship of some sort. Again, I was totally off. Um, but yeah, so good on the author. She fooled me, which is not an easy feat. So good for her. Um, let's circle back to Yuki for a minute. I'm curious, what do you think attracted her to Alex? And the follow-up question to that is, do you believe her attraction to him was genuine, or do you think, very similar to May, like you pointed out, Grace, do you think she liked him because he gave her a proximity to whiteness?
The way the way that May described her dad throughout the book, um, I think gives us an idea that he was charming in that douchey kind of way where you don't realize it at first and then they turn into an asshole. And I feel like at first Yuki, the way that they described Yuki being attracted to Alex, I think felt really genuine. Like it didn't, it was just like because she's met a lot of people at this point, I think. Um, so yeah, I feel like it was genuine, but in that way that an insidious, charming man can kind of take advantage of someone who's really young with a power imbalance and then manipulate it into these like really strong feelings, and until you get older you don't realize like what's actually like what's going on and what you've given up. And I think there was a part of it, a proximity to whiteness, but I feel like it was also more of like a proximity to this is an important man who finds me attractive and wants to be with me. And I feel like at that point it might have been more of like the dynamic of wanting to be wanted, wanting to be loved, and by someone that you view as important, like a teacher, or someone who's like in high standing at the school. Um, and then he got in too deep, figuratively and literally. So now he like impregnated somebody who's keeping a child. And so now they have to deal with the fact that he's now roped in and he's tied in, and he can't just have like this fun little mistress fling thing. Um, and then move on with his life. And so then he ends up finding someone younger eventually again to just kind of do it all over again, but quote unquote for him, probably do it the right way. Um, and then and then the person he does it the quote unquote right way with has a shit ton of money. So obviously that I think that had something to do with it too, is that, this younger woman that Yuki saw like him with, she had so much fucking money. So he knew he'd be set up for life because as we learn, he's a D-bag and likes to like take reservations away from people who like did stuff the right way. He likes shortcuts. And so, he's able to charm women or like make them feel at ease to be able to take them for all that they're worth. So,
As much as I hate it, I fear if I was in her shoes, like I was in a place I didn't know, um, everything was foreign, and there's this guy who sees me, um, I would be a Yuki. Like, um, you know, putting so much of yourself into something and then just like devoting yourself in an attempt for romance, real. Like, if I was her age, like when I was her age, I could definitely see myself in that position, especially um, with uh, with in a position so enticing. I guess like someone sees you, um, it doesn't matter how old they are, which should have been a red blaring flags. But like, yeah, what makes it worse is that Alex Loki sounds like he'd be my type. Nerdy. I assumed he was nerdy. And then the book mentioned that when he made her bleed, which was crazy, that if he found out that he'd have a sick power trip fantasy at how his virility made her bleed. And that told me all I needed to know about his character. But with whether Yuki's feelings towards him were genuine or if they were like just proximity to whiteness, I would say they were both, I guess. Mm, yeah. And like Grace said, Alex was so charming. Because Matilda, Matilda seemed like so out of his league with the way Yuki described her, but he was able to, you know, charm her. He must not be, yeah, I don't know. Uh, yeah, I feel like proximity to whiteness did play a part, but it was also like the circumstances and maybe like Yuki's desire for to be seen. Right place, right time. Or I guess you could say wrong place, wrong time, and like wrong person, wrong situation, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still struggling myself. I mean, I just am not totally sure if I think that her attraction to him was genuine. Um, Like Grace and you, Arian, pointed out, I think that she was really excited by the fact that this seemingly important man sees her and wants her. Um, all we really have to compare her romantic life to is the ex-boyfriend whose name, unfortunately, I cannot remember right now. Um, she dumped him because he was boring, even though he like was very nice to her and loved her and all of that. He was a boring man, and I think she found Alex to be exciting, and I think that was kind of enough. um, Also, I'm not sure just how much attraction was there. Everything just kind of happened so fast to her. It's almost like she had very little say. um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if I can believe that it was genuine. Now I'm curious, how impactful do you believe the power dynamic of Alex being her teacher is to their relationship?
Mm. I feel like really impactful because I feel like there was also a power dynamic of language. And so there's a lot of times whenever Yuki would say stuff like, I didn't understand. And he just like assumed she understood everything that he said, which I don't think he actually did. I think he was using language as a power dynamic as well. And I feel like that language as a power dynamic through the whole story is kind of like a through line. Because at the end, she was trying to get, you know, May back and you trying to speak a second language and like law from a different country to try to get her child back. And he knew that and used that power to his advantage as well through the whole thing. And so I feel like the power, it was like a power dynamic of language, of whiteness in like a white country, right? Um, and then also I feel like he was 16 years her senior was what I thought they said in the book. Like, I think he was 35 and she was 19. So, ew. Like, I mean, I put myself in like the shoes of me at 19 and someone who's 35. And then just me being around that age and then interacting with 19-year-olds, there is always going to be a power dynamic there, whether you want there to be or not, because that's just such a huge difference versus like just graduating high school and being by yourself versus having like almost 2 decades of dating experience, of life experience, and then of trials and tribulations throughout your life. Like think about how much you grow in 1 or 2 years in your life as an adult from like me at 28 versus now is like so different, but in like such a good way because I've like learned and grown. Um, so I'm always of the mindset that the rule should be half your age plus 7 is the minimum you can date. And I just yeah, and that language piece I think was really huge because I mean Yuki would just constantly say, I didn't understand what he said. Or it does I didn't he assumed I understood what he meant. And I just think about learning a second language too. Just like in Spanish, I have a friend whose second language is English. And he showed me a picture of his kid. And I said, oh my gosh, what a cutie patootie. And he went, what does that mean? Can you explain that? And then me having to actually explain for the first time what cutie patootie to somebody. And it just made me realize how much there's also nuance to a language and how you think and how you feel. And so she probably never really got to accurately describe how she was feeling in her language, because he didn't care enough to learn, and vice versa. So, like how earnest maybe some of these things are, some of these choices were, and her longing for home. So yeah, I think it was kind of all encompassing in that relationship.
Okay, pretty much everything Grace said was spot on, like the power dynamic. I felt like him being a teacher, it was like the avenue for everything. You know, him being older and more stable, and then that you know, led to him being able to court her in the way that only someone with like in his position could do. Uh, the language thing, um, I definitely feel like it was intentional. Who's to say Yuki is the first student he did this to? I feel like, okay, it doesn't say anything about that, but like, come on. It felt sick. It's like reading it, like how you gonna be like, 35 or something. Yeah. And yeah, it was the avenue for everything, the home, and then the thing. He just, he probably would have dropped Yuki if she didn't get pregnant, to be honest, and then moved on to the next. He did it anyway, but like he did it much later because everything else. Um, yeah, damn. That's all.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I mean, I think when I say teacher, I don't, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think that just applies to him teaching her violin. I think he was her teacher in essentially every avenue of her life. He taught her that this is how sex is supposed to feel because he was her first sexual experience. This is how love is meant to feel because he was her first love. This is how marriage feels, how motherhood feels, how adulthood feels. Um, and yeah, he just taught her, unfortunately, all the wrong things. Um, and like Grace was saying, I strongly do believe yes, he used his understanding English in an English speaking country to his advantage. He knew that she knew so little, and he definitely used that. There's a moment where Yuki says maybe he used English not being my first language to his advantage. Maybe all he wanted was a silent girl to worship him. And yeah, that encapsulates their entire relationship. And for me, like you mentioned, Grace, and I think you did some, Arian, it's a giant red flag for me when you have two individuals who speak different languages. Or if one person speaks English, the other person's second language is English. If the English speaker makes no attempt to learn the other language, um, while I have never dated anyone who hasn't spoke English, or at least fluently, um, I did date someone who was blind. And of course, yes, he spoke English, we could talk. I still made an effort to understand a little bit of Braille. Obviously, I'm not fluent in it. I couldn't read a whole book in Braille, but I understand a little bit just because I want to see the world through his experience. I'm curious how he experiences certain things differently than I do. And I think it's a major red flag if someone is not willing to do that. Um, yeah, unfortunately, because Yuki has so little experience, she probably couldn't see that either, how much of a red flag that is. But yeah. Okay, now let's get to probably the most juicy part of the book. What do you think of the relationship slash friendship between Fran and May?
Oh, Fran, Fran. Yeah. Oh man. That ugh. I feel that relationship so hard with May with May too. Just because it's like, it's like, oh, we're just having a sexual experience together to be better with boys. It says no actual straight. It's so crazy how often like that happens. And then yeah, so Oh my gosh. It's just so funny because it was just so real. That whole thing was so real. Because I remember, I guess, I was like 13 or 14, and I was talking to an actual straight friend of mine. Because a lot of times growing up, I would just accidentally be friends with a lot of queer people. We didn't know each other were queer yet. So I'd be like, oh, everyone wants to like kiss girls. That's just a girl thing. They'd be like, totally. Or I accidentally became best friends with another non-binary person, but we actually didn't come out until we were like in our late 20s, early 30s. And then we were accidentally echo chamber with each other, being like, oh my gosh, yeah, I don't feel like a girl either. You either? Okay, it's just a girl thing. So just the fact that, they had these experiences together, and Fran being like, "Oh, I like girls for boys. You don't just rail each other in bamboo if it's just for boy things." And so I can't tell you how many times uh I would talk to some of my women friends who was also like bisexual, um, and how they would have these experiences with their quote unquote best friends from the age of like 13, 14, and 15, 16 together. Just like those early adolescent years of where even behind their boyfriends' backs, they would still like do these things together, but like they considered it not cheating because with another girl, or they were like, we're just practicing. And then lo and behold, they're like either bisexual or a lesbian, right? But then there's all this heteronormativity. And so that whole relationship was just watching my frustrations growing up. And then Fran just like falling into heteronormativity. And I felt like Fran still wanted to be with May, but was like embarrassed by her sexuality also and needed men's validation. And so just went the like opposite direction. And then Bran would just have to be this dumbest person alive to not realize that May was like in love with her. They had like some sort of thing going on. Um and then May, oh my goodness. I'm just let her go. She's not worth it. Go have a queer experience with like a hot like young lesbian. Go to off in college, something. Just do something. Um but yeah, that whole read was just like, oh no. And I just felt it. And then of course it's like your first sexual experience, and then you're attached anyway with those types of things. And then someone knows you deeply because you don't want to come out of the closet yet. And then there's a whole dynamic too of being queer and rich is really weird. So me working at a country club around a whole bunch of hyper wealthy people, you have to like there's no diversity there. You're not really allowed to do certain things. And it's just like this dynamic was just so awful to witness again in such a visceral way. Um, I'm just so glad I'm not a teenager anymore. Like, oh my gosh, like rereading some of this stuff, I was like, oof, I'm glad that we're past this or past this part of growth.
Okay, real. Um, I feel like the throes and woes of like being a teenager are escaping me, and that's something I don't know how to deal with. I don't know how to process. It's like, um, yeah. So the desire to become like someone's number one while wanting to be them or like emulate them and while being jealous of them all at the same time hit home for me. Like, there's this guy in my friend group, and we're still friends to this day. Like, okay, we're the same race, but like I always found him more charismatic than me. He was richer, he was smarter. And I always envied that about him, but at the same time, it was one of my sources of attraction. And yeah, it was so crazy. And I hated him for it at the same time that I fancied him. Um, yeah, we're still friends to this day, and there are flickers of that emotion, but it's like not really there anymore. And I feel like Fran, the same thing happened to Fran as well, but nothing really happened between us. So for Fran, it was definitely much more intense. Um, I always live for romance, and I feel like a part of that, or a part of the reason why, is because I don't really have much sense of it, or like I don't really have much experience with it. Um, I'm kind of grieving the fact that I don't really have an adolescent romance or any inkling of it. So like any sign of adolescence, flings or romance, I eat that shit up. Like I don't know. Like, um, so I like that aspect of the book. I always knew that was I was gonna like that. But yeah, I live vicariously through it. So there's that. When what Jonathan said about good luck, babe, I feel like that is very fitting. I didn't even think about it, but then yeah, and then I feel like the upcoming single, The Subway, stream it when it drops. You can also use that for the situation. Um, yeah, it was just real. It was so real. I think it was probably the most not really, I don't know, but it was definitely one of the more nuanced relationships in the novel. And I really like how they explored it, especially with the end of May just finding herself, being more of herself. And then may or may not be a coincidence, but once she found herself and once she accepted herself, her Asian side, her culture, her heritage, she found herself less attracted to May or less desperate for her approval or, and that her want or her need to be accepted or her proximity to whiteness definitely played a part in her attraction to me. Yeah. Yay.
Yeah, like you two are hinting at, the relationship between May and Fran is just full of nothing but queer frustration. Luckily, like I said, I don't have any experience in this area. I've never fallen for a straight guy, nor have I had a lot of straight male friends in my adolescence. I have a fair amount now, but none that I have an attraction to. But yeah, poor May. I'm reminded of a similar conversation we had when we read Johnny Appleseed late last year, I believe. Um, and my opinion still stands. I'm not going to say I am anti introducing sex to friendships, but proceed with caution because look at what can happen when you do that. And one person obviously wants more from it than the other one does. Um, yeah. I'll just say poor May. And Grace, you brought up something interesting that I hadn't really considered until now. And I'm curious how you feel, Arian. And you, of course, Grace. Do you think that Fran actually had feelings for May, or do you think that she just liked May's attention?
I think she had feelings for May, but then she pushed them aside to be quote unquote normal. And I think that happens a lot. And then as time went on, she just, I think, wrapped it around as like a, that's just something fun adolescent girls do. And again, if you're actually a straight girl, you don't do that. You just don't do that. Because, like, or maybe, but not like that. Yeah, I don't know. I just, all of my experiences with like when I actually talk to straight like women and I'm like, oh yeah, because she like made out and kissed all like your friends growing up, and they're just like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oopsie. So, yeah, I feel like it's Fran like pushed away her queerness to be normal. And then May was just like, huh? And it happens a lot, especially when you're trying to like quote unquote fit in with your friends and stuff like that. Like as an adult, you're doing what you think you're supposed to do for your family.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely do think Fran did have feelings for May. Uh, obviously not to the same extent. But yeah, what Grace said, pushed it away, repressed it, just dismissed it as like this silly little adolescent teenage fling or this just thing they did. So I definitely agree. Also, the environment that they had was, wasn't really conducive or stifling. There's this moment where they were at a table and they were talking politics or something, and May mentioned something, oh, how they just assert themselves, stuff like they didn't know, they wouldn't know about the stuff they were talking about, and then she mentions, LGBT somewhere along the lines there. But yeah. Fran definitely felt something for her. Even in the end, I think they hinted how like Fran wouldn't look at her for too long because if she did, then something would happen or something might happen, something might unravel. And yeah, I felt like that was very telling that there was still some tension between them, and it was Fran who who always pulled away, and it was her that yeah.
I'm still pondering over it, and unfortunately, I am just not totally sure if I'm sold that Fran's attraction to May is real. I think at one point it was. I do believe early on she did have a genuine attraction to May, but I think towards the end, it really is just about the attention. I mean, Fran, I'm not going to go far as to say a narcissist or any of that, but I think she definitely has certain narcissistic traits. Um, so I think she just really loved the attention. Now, I am thinking about bisexuality, and I do believe that Fran is bisexual. I do believe she does have a genuine attraction to women. But I know that even amongst bisexual people, they say there's a difference between who you can find sexually attractive versus romantically attractive. And sometimes, while you may find both men and women sexually attractive, that may not carry over into your romantic life. Um, and I know we have talked before in this club when we read Black Queer Hoe about bisexual women who primarily, if not only, date men. And I wonder if that would describe Fran. Um, I don't know. Perhaps it would. And then I'm like, I'm not sure. Does that mean that she's hiding her queerness, or does she just express it differently than perhaps we expect her to? I don't know. I'm not bisexual, so I am not the person to lead that conversation at all. But I am curious. Also, I'm just doing a little bit of digging, like I always do, on these authors, on this author. Um, and she is bisexual. So I'm curious. I know, Grace, you mentioned early on May having to kind of hide her queerness to find attractions to men. I'm curious if May is also bisexual. And perhaps similar to Fran, she has a difference between who she finds romantically attractive versus sexually attractive. Um, and also hearing the author talk about the book in general, it seems to me like she really kind of modeled May after herself. I mean, if you guys all want to take a second, Google the author and like look at her. She looks exactly how May is described. So I'm assuming May is meant to be her. I could be wrong on that, but um, I'm curious, is this like how it feels to be a bisexual woman? I don't know. I don't think any of us here are, so I don't think any of us know the answer to that question, but yeah. Now, another juicy part of the story. How do you feel about Alex's decision to tell May her mother is dead? Obviously, way before she actually dies.
That man can go pound sand. He can go hurl himself into the sun. And um that decision was the most selfish, egotistical decision. So he didn't have to deal with him pulling May away from her own mother. That was only for him, so he could have his perfect little family with his new hot young wife who wants to have like babies with him or what, like whatever. That was just so he didn't have to deal with it. I can't imagine what kind of a m monster you would have to be to like tell your 6-year-old kid that their mother's dead when that didn't happen for another, they say like 15 years or something like that. Or like what? Like May would have been 20, 21, so not even like I don't the seething vileness I felt towards Alex because he was so unapologetic and was still fucking lying whenever that email came through, like for May, and was just still lying and just, I think his reality finally was crumbling down around him because lies eventually always come out, especially when they're that monstrous. Um, hmm, yeah, that's how I feel about that. Like, fuck that guy.
I hate him. I feel like that is like the consensus. But yeah, there's no situation in the story where like I don't think there'd be a situation like a normal situation period where it'd make it okay. Like and you like the desperation of Yuki like to travel back to London, like I don't know, a few years in the future to want to see Yuki again, and then him just not caring, and then just, you know, whatever. Yeah. I okay, this is just like a personal experience or like my personal experience with white men, but they are so I'm generalizing, but with my experience, they are so I don't know, there's something that allows them to be so kind of like selfish or to overlook the needs or the desires of others for their own based on them. uh, yeah, I don't know. I hate him. Like that is just one evil dude.
Yeah, similar to you guys, I don't think there's really any excuse for him lying to her about her mother's death. I think it's just such an incredibly strange and manipulative and cruel thing to do, especially knowing how, from essentially very early on in her childhood, she's always craved her mother. And then her mother actually is still alive and breathing and existing in the world. And you're just lying to her. That is just so disgusting. Um, and that storyline reminds me so much of just really any storyline, whether it be fictional, like in books, movies, television, whatever, or in real life with interracial adoption. Obviously, yes, May is not adopted, but she is being raised in a entirely white family, in entirely white school systems. Her friends are white, all of the things. And it seems as if Alex really wants to rob her of her Japanese heritage and essentially raise her like she is white. And I know this is a very common thread with biracials who are raised by their white side. Essentially, they lose all access to any sort of heritage, cultural understanding, language, food, anything that ties back to their other half. And I would have loved to really hear way more about that. That's a perspective I don't have. I'm not biracial. So I don't know what that feels like, but I would have loved, since the author is, for her to really kind of hone in on that just a little bit more because I found myself so curious. about what that feels like. And also, I know we all hate Alex, of course, but I would have loved a chapter from Alex's perspective, just one. I just genuinely want to see what goes through his brain when he does these different things. And like, what exactly is he hoping to accomplish? Like, how do you think that hiding your daughter's birth mother from her for 15 or so years, how do you think that's going to pan out when she eventually finds out? Do you genuinely think she would never find out? I don't know. I just would have loved a peek into that psyche. So yeah, yeah. Now, since we are talking about Alex so intently, I'm curious, what do you think about the relationship between May and her father? Obviously, before the reveal of Haruka and Yuki and all the things before that. And I'm curious, as a follow up question, do you think it's possible to be a bad husband and a good father?
I think May's relationship with her father always felt kind of strained, but in a way that, like, when you're young, you really want your parents' love and you want them to accept you. And the moment for me that solidified how much I don't like Alex was when they went to the movie theater, and that play was like the most obviously racist, horrific, fucking crazy. Like, I was just like, ew, like it just like made me have a pit in my stomach reading about what was going on in that play. And then how it's pretty much like accepting that, if you're like a foreign looking woman, it's okay to get sexually assaulted by like a white man and it's funny, right? Or like all this, like things that have happened to all these women in the story. And then how Alex is like, oh, don't make a big deal. And it's like, you're not even accepting that part of your daughter. You're trying to kill that part of your daughter to like fit into white society because your daughter's just white enough to pass just enough, except for at certain times. And so I think as the relationship, when she's getting older, the relationship with her father seems like it's getting more strained because of these, like, again, macro and micro aggressions towards who she is as a person that she can't change, probably because he's resentful of her mother and then killed her off 15 years too early. And I think it is very possible to be a bad husband and a good father, just because, like, bad husband, as in, like, sometimes two people really don't mesh well anymore, and you're not like, and you don't know what to do with that relationship. But I've seen people be like, not necessarily good husbands anymore, but still be really present and there for their kids because that relationship dynamic, I think, for some people is a lot easier to manage. It's like I can always be there for my kid, but then navigating a romantic relationship that maybe because you choose each other every day in a relationship like that, and then sometimes you can't choose your kids, but apparently it can still be awful to your kids. I think that's such a hard thing to navigate, just coming from a family background for myself where my father was a bad husband and a bad dad. So, but seeing other people's parents kind of like not being the best husband, but being a way better father. Um, yeah. But yeah, poor May's relationship with her dad, I think, was always strained, and he always, and I feel like she then eventually became an afterthought for his new family also. So like, I think the vibes that she got, and um after a while. So I think just finding out that your dad's always been awful, is like an icing, like a cherry on top of the cake in this situation for May, to maybe actually be able to let him go too and let that relationship go and be who she needs to be.
For real. I mean, at the start, it seemed like they had like a good relationship going on, but then, as Grace mentioned, like it was told from May's point of view, and so, as a child, she wasn't really aware of all the things, or she didn't really see it in like a light that any like somebody else who's not a child who who's not aware, doesn't have the experience to look at it in any other way would. So when Meg started growing up, their relationship did start to get more strained. Um, yeah, like what what Grace said. I don't even think she brought it up how the play was like um distasteful in that regard. I'm pretty sure she was like, "Oh, I don't want to get into it because he'll be like, "Oh, you're reading too into it. It's not that deep." So that means she's brought up something like that before. That was his response. And it couldn't have been just once. Like she had to have done it a few times. So that's telling. Uh, there was this scene when she was growing up, and then they were like, "Oh, you love Oriental night," like where they tried to um bring food or try to cook her cuisine. And like I guess you could say that he tried, but in the most superficial manner. Because if he really did want to try to connect uh with her like roots and stuff, then it would require him to look inside himself to reflect. And he'd realize that he's done a lot of, you know, shit. And I feel like that, you know, the cognitive dissonance of of all of that would just, yeah. Eh, uh, uh.
It's funny that you two say that it seemed as if they had a good relationship, obviously, until May finds out the truth. I felt differently. I felt like their relationship was always kind of strange. It seemed as if, Grace, you mentioned the word afterthought, and I think that's a perfect word to encapsulate their entire relationship, in my opinion. It seemed like May was always kind of like hanging on to her father while her father tries his best to like move into his new family with Matilda and their two children. Um, I am not someone who comes from a background of like multiple marriages and all of that, but from what I've heard from my friends who do come from those sorts of backgrounds, it's almost like the child from the previous marriage is always kind of a bit of a shame. You're just like a constant reminder of what didn't work, a relationship that failed. Um, and even because May is obviously biracial, she kind of sticks out way too much for Alex. He's desperately trying to fit into this rich, high society, and she is very much not that because she just sticks out way too much. And it's funny that you two both bring up that play. That for me was just absolutely disgusting. And it was a reminder as to why I don't really have very many white friends or really any. Um, Very similar to how a lot of male humor is rooted in misogyny, a lot of white humor is rooted in racism. And yeah, poor May having to suffer through that. And like Arian brought up, seemingly that's not the first time that's happened. So I couldn't imagine what the hell goes on in that family and that friend group or that social group. Um, but yeah. Now let's go on to Haruka. Um, I'm curious, why do you think the author waited so long to have us meet Haruka for the first time?
Now looking back on it, I feel like it was intentional because that's when Haruka was actually born, was like way after um like May was born and that whole relationship happened, right? So I don't remember the age difference between the two sisters. I don't know if it was like 7 years or something like that or a little bit longer, but it was like now understanding the full story, you're like, oh, so I feel like it was almost quasi chronological when it came to like Mei and Ruka's story, and then Yuki was kind of thrown in there to kind of help us understand the sisters' dynamic better. Um, yeah.
I didn't even think of that. Like, but wow, I think, yeah, I think Grace might be right. Because, well, yeah, I have no, I don't know why they would, but like, she did it right. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, like Grace points out, yeah, it makes sense in the sense of that is when Haruka's actually born. So of course she comes into the story later because she's born later. But I think it also just kind of serves the mystery aspect. I mean, because we're building up so much to this Haruka character. I'm like, who is she? What is she going to be? What is she going to do? Um, and also, there was a time where I thought that maybe Mei was Haruka's mother because for the early stages of Haruka's point of view, we never give her mother a name. She's just always called mom or mama. Um, and I believe Haruka is introduced to us after Mei is raped by Hugo. And we mentioned Hugo not wearing a condom and how sperm can travel to the vagina, all of that. So I was thinking maybe Mei moved back home and then Haruka is her daughter. And also, Haruka mentioned seeing photos of a young blonde girl, her mother holding a young blonde girl. I thought maybe that was Fran. Um, so yeah, I think it just all kind of serves that mystery, that twist element. And it just kind of works. I mean, yeah, I mean, good on the author. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but if it was, good for her. Um, Now, a part that really kind of confused me as we learn that Alex is not Haruka's father, like I think we are supposed to believe, um, when we first learn about Mei and Haruka being sisters. Why do you think her grandmother, gave her Alex's information and not the ex-boyfriend's information, who is, of course, her actual father?
Yeah, I thought it was because of the whole like mistress situation and how he's never really involved. And I thought it was so that she could reach out to meet her sister because that was like a huge mystery. Um, that's where I thought it was kind of going, like alluding to the fact that, her bio dad was just kind of like absent because he like was married. And I thought that maybe like Baba was like, oh, I don't want to like disrupt that family because of like the shame or, I don't know exactly what the kind of like culture around that is. And I thought it was just to try to like help her reconnect with the other part of like her mom. I thought it was for um getting to know her sister, but I hadn't really thought about that per se because I was just so like once that email went through and then the phone dinged on that side, I was just kind of like, who to what now? And so then I was kind of like locked in.
Honestly, I think it was just like that they didn't want to tell her. So they just let her think that. I mean, she didn't even want to tell her when Haruka was pleading with her to tell her. And if it wasn't for like Haruka's history of being angry rather than sad, then um I don't think she would have told her. I think it was just that it was a really dark time because um she was um she was raped and like it's such a painful thought for her that she didn't even want to think back on it. So there's that aspect. I think yeah, she just would have preferred it if she never found out in the first place. But yeah.
Yeah, I was a bit confused too. At first, when she gave Haruka Alex's information, I thought perhaps the grandmother didn't know anything about the rape and that she believed that Alex was her father, which of course we later find out she did, of course, know. Um, so I guess the only reason is like you two said, she wanted Haruka to connect with May. Um, and I guess not the guy, because even though he does have a lot of guilt around Yuki's death, I highly doubt he knew Haruka. Well, you know what? We don't know, do we? If he knows Haruka exists or not. Um, I don't know. Was that mentioned in the book? Do you two know?
I think in the end, they mentioned that he was gonna support the kid
Oh, you're right.
to college, but didn't want anything
Yeah.
to do with it after that because he was married and had kids of his own.
Hmm. Huh. Yeah, so now I'm really wondering why didn't she tell her who her actual father is? But I mean, to be honest, he's a worthless piece of shit. I mean, what he would have really done more for her life? Probably not. Um, so whatever. Now, what do you guys think of the relationship between Haruka and May?
I think it's really interesting that language came up again as instead of a power imbalance, it ended up being like two people wishing they like were actively trying to learn another language to try to communicate with each other because they actually love each other. Um, and so that part of the relationship showed that they really wanted to connect with one another. And I really, really like the part of the book where they talked about, forgot who said it, but it was like looks and body language speak more than words can. And so that's how they were communicating with each other the most and having this deep understanding about the loss of a mother and then figuring out what it's like to have a sister for the first time. Um, and yeah, I thought it was just a really beautiful way to connect because not only could they connect with each other, their culture, the memory of their mother, and then I think it really culminated into the truth will set you free kind of narrative where no more lies. I'm telling the truth now. The truth only harms. Not telling the truth only harms, and it doesn't do anybody any good. And so then all this truth was like laid out on the table, and that's when like real healing could begin, I think, for everybody. And so I hope that May keeps taking the Japanese language courses and visits every year, slash maybe even moves there for a time and lives abroad. And they can really connect more deeply because I love that they were able to do fireworks together. And Ruka wasn't able to do fireworks with her grandfather since they were like little, since her mother's death. And it just felt like they could heal with each other and didn't have to pretend to be someone else with each other. And I really love the fact that Haruka said, I wonder if she has a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And I really liked that. Because then, Haruka, I think, is going to accept May and then vice versa. And they both went in the hot part of the bathhouse together and could share that memory. And I don't know. I'm the youngest of two older, so like a family of like three siblings, total, including me. And I'm really close with my siblings. All the things that we've been through, just with my parents, with our parents. And one of my siblings is also non-binary, and we really like connect in that way of like this deep understanding, but being completely different people. Like they're super athletic. They, they're like obsessed with fitness and like cycling, and I'm like, that's not my life. And I, love science, and I have like that part of me. But when we come together, it's just like this knowing and understanding about love, and then knowing and understanding about this deep trauma that you both share that there's no way for anyone else to really understand or to describe because you both went through it together, I think can be sometimes harmful, right? So you can accidentally trigger each other, which I'm sure they're going to do when they're figuring out their relationship, but then they can also help heal. And so I really loved seeing that dynamic because it felt to me that's what the other one needed was someone to deeply understand the other one. And I feel like their experiences have this deep understanding that you can't really get explaining that kind of trauma um to somebody sometimes unless someone also has that kind of deep understanding. And I just thought it was such a cute real connection that they were able to have with one another while trying to navigate the language barrier.
I ate it up. Like, I really loved it. Like, I don't know if she could have, if there was like any other way to write it. Like, I love the awkwardness, the nerves, the anxiety, um, the excitement of just, um, meeting a half sister that you never knew existed and meeting a half sister that was like just a constant presence in your life, but was never given any shape or form. So when they met, it was kind of like she got a solid figure to a sister, and she gained a connection to a culture, and um, it was vital to both of their healing, to their journey, and it was like full circle stuff like that, and I didn't really think about it until Grace mentioned it, but. Uh, the language aspect, now that I'm noticing it, um, and the contrast to Alex and Yuki was like, wow, damn. Yeah, um, it was really cute. I loved how it was awkward at first, and they broke the ice, but then the ice formed back multiple times because it's never just like linear meeting someone new. So, the way that they saw their mother in each other, comparing and contrasting their features or personality, assuming the best and the worst of each other, uh, just, yeah, the overthinking, the, uh, the, would she like this aspect of me? Would she judge me for this aspect? Um, and yeah, I just thought it was really nice.
I thought the relationship was so beautiful, but also so heartbreaking. I mean, I think the phrase language barrier is perfect for their relationship. I mean, it genuinely felt like it was like a wall. You have these two women who desperately want to connect with one another, but they don't know how. And of course, they're trying to navigate the awkwardness of not knowing about each other's existence for essentially most of their lives. And that is already awkward enough. But also, on top of that, the awkwardness of like they both only know so many phrases in each other's language. Um, I don't know. It was just so, it was so beautiful, but so tragic. And like you said, Grace, I genuinely do hope that May does continue her Japanese language courses. And then, of course, hopefully Haruka tries to learn a bit of English or a bit more of English so she can kind of level out the playing fields there. But yeah, such a beautiful relationship. I kind of wish they would have met earlier on in the story. That way we could have kind of seen more of the progression of their relationship as opposed to just, I'm assuming it was like a weekend or so that they spent together. But still good. Still good. Now, let's talk about what perhaps is one of the more confusing parts of this story for me. Um, what did you guys think the importance was, or if you saw any really, of the author's inclusion of the fairy tales between the chapters?
Yeah, I thought it was because May's mother gave her that fairy tale book in Japanese, and she said she liked the stories. She liked the pictures, but she didn't know what they said. And so I thought it was a way of like narrating certain parts of their life and then basing it on like us as the reader being able to understand the stories. It's like Yuki's mom was trying to give her advice through this story because like storytelling usually for children is a way to, I don't know, like help them in some way to like grow or understand certain things that can be confusing or difficult. So like the Peach story was obviously I think about like sexual assault, and then like the Fox story is like not truly being yourself. And so I kind of related it to the storybook that Yuki's mom had given May, and she couldn't understand the words because they were in Japanese. But then like we as a reader could kind of understand the story and how it was supposed to like tie in to the life experiences of everybody was what I was thinking as I was reading it, because I think the Princess Peach thing, I think I remember May talking about how her favorite story like with the pictures was like the princess when she was talking to Fran at the beginning of the book and like stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely think it tied in with the fairy tale book that um May had. It was just like I also think it was like a way to break things up. Uh, yeah, and how it narrated themes for upcoming or previous chapters, if I remember correctly. Like I don't know if it was before or after, but the no, it was definitely before, I think. But when the pomegranate or peach story about a thief coming in and going into the garden, oh, my heart just sunk. Like yeah, it was. So it did, like, give you a hint as to where the story was going or as to, um, yeah, what was about to happen, what happened. Just gave a little more context in a way that was more unorthodox, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't really understand it too much when I first read the story. Now that I'm hearing you two talk about it, I mean, I'm obviously getting it a lot more now. Um, I mean, I think the story served to kind of set the tone for what's to come. It essentially is like foreshadowing. I think that's most prevalent with the princess and the pomegranate story. Obviously, that leads to May and Hugo's storyline. There's another story in the book too. It's called The Little Boat. That one confused me. I didn't really get what that was meant to be about. Was that supposed to be about Yuki and Alex, or Haruka and is his name Kai or Kay, the guy that she meets online? Um, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm not sure if those stories are original or if those are like kind of folk tales that are common in Japan or just around the world in general. But they kind of, I don't know, they kind of made me feel a bit disconnected from the story. It kind of interrupted the story's really, really good progression and connection with these fairy tales, and I just didn't really like them. Um, but you guys are right, especially you, Grace, that it does bring up the constant reminder of the fairy tale book that Yuki gives May, which is a child. So I'll give it a pass. Um, okay. Uh, Now, what did we think of this book's ending?
I really liked it. I feel like I would have liked maybe a little bit more, but that's kind of what I think the point of the ending being what it was that there was so much growth with everybody. They finally connected, and it's just that's how being a human is. It's like the story is always continuing on and on and on, and there's not like a lot of closure. And so this since this story was just so raw and so real for me, um, that's just how things progress and like end. Like this is just like the end of maybe feeling less connected or figuring out the truth and then being able to move forward with your life. And I really like I think it was the very, very last page where um I have a puppy on my lap and I can't grab the book, but like that very last sentence where it was just one page for what it said. I loved that a lot. Uh and I think it really kind of was a hopeful ending that everyone was going to be, yeah, yeah, she is not yellow, she is golden. I love that because it really just kind of talks about the whiteness and the racism that she experienced, right? They talk about that and in the play, like all that yellow face and all of that. And then it's like, no, she's golden. It's like they are whole, like they're worthwhile. They're shining. And I was like, oh, what a great just one page with like two sentences was, I think, just phenomenal.
Okay, yeah, pretty much what Grace said. Um, I feel like with stories like this, there can't really be a definitive ending. Much in the way that there like wasn't really a like I didn't know where this was gonna go. Like throughout the story, I there wasn't really a path that it followed, so I never knew how it was gonna end. So I couldn't really imagine a kind of ending for it. I thought May killed herself. Like when Bran was calling out to her and the wind was blocking her, and then it said, and she walked into the edge or walked into the ledge. Like I don't know, I thought she killed herself, and then I reread it and I was like, wait, no, no, she didn't. It's like, okay, whoopsie, my bad, my bad. Um, yeah, I just thought that was kind of funny. Uh, but yeah, I really loved how they wrapped it up. I don't think they could have done anything else. I mean, yeah, for stories like this, open endings are like, what else can you do? I really liked it. Loved it.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed the book's ending. It was so sweet. These two sisters are now kind of wishing each other a goodbye, but it's not a goodbye, it's more of a see you soon, which I found out that is what I don't know how to pronounce it perfectly, but I believe it's matani, the Japanese phrase. It literally translates to see you soon. Um, and I thought that was so pretty, so beautiful. The fact that they're both still going to try to be in one another's lives, even though they obviously do have their difficulties. Um, and yeah, I love that. I love the fact that May finally found a home. She finally found a community of people where she feels that she can fit in. And she doesn't feel judged for the fact that she's a bit different. She's only half Japanese, not fully Japanese, yet they still accept her. And that doesn't seem to be something that she ever fully experienced when dealing with her white side. She was always, also Japanese. She was never just allowed to be white, if that makes any sense. So I loved that. I also love the little subtle tie-in of May giving Haruka the fairy tale book, and then her writing the inscription almost as if, now I'm going to be your mother, since it's given from mother to daughter, the generations. I thought that was so beautiful. And then Haruka's like, one day my goal is to read this book to May in our mother tongue. I loved that too. So good. This author, she ate this book up. Like, girl, please keep writing more stories. um, Now, since we can all agree that the book's ending is quite open-ended, what do you think is next for our characters? Our two living characters, of course.
May is gonna have the best lesbian loving relationship of her entire life. She's gonna go live in Japan. They're gonna all get to know each other and just really understand and just heal together. And then Haruka won't feel so alone anymore. And then um Haruka gets what Haruka wants. And that's what I want. I want May to live in Japan for a while and just have the best girlfriend ever for a little while. Or forever. And just like really heal that side of her. And then they're both gonna continue to learn each other's language, and it's gonna be great. There's gonna be a lot of healing and sisterhood talks to come, is what I hope for.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. Yeah, happy endings to both of them, to everyone involved, except, the man in the story. Um, yeah. Uh, I hope May, you know, keeps in touch with the culture, keeps up with the Japanese lessons, lets that manifest more into, her daily life, or just like in her way of not really conducting herself, but in the way she carries herself, like more pride in herself, stuff like that. And Haruka, she stops, or like, um, yeah, she gets it going. Like, I don't know. Yeah, just good thoughts, vibes on all of them. If she like takes over her grandfather's rice paddy, I feel like she'd do that. Like it was alluded to, but yeah, love it. Yeah.
What I hope to happen and what I do believe is going to happen, I think first Haruka quits sex work. She leaves Tokyo and moves back home with her grandmother and grandfather. Um, she takes care of her grandfather until he passes away. She takes over the rice farm with the help of his like helper guys, whatever their names were. I don't think she'll do it all by herself, but with their help. Um, I desperately hope that May moves to Japan permanently, that she really strengthens the bond she has with her mother. I'm sorry, with Haruka and with her grandmother. I think towards the end, May is able to realize just how much her mother lives on through her grandmother and her sister. Um, and I think she desperately wants to cling on to the last pieces of information that she can get about her mother, especially because Alex will never be honest about really anything. I highly doubt that. So I don't think he'll be much help. I hope she cuts off her father permanently. I, like Grace said, I hope she has the happiest lesbian relationship that grants her all the happiness and love and great sex and all the amazing things that come with relationships. Um, so yeah, that's what I believe is going to happen, and I do hope it's going to happen. Um, okay, now one final thing before we wrap up. I found out in an interview with this author that this book was never really meant to be a book. The author, Hanako Footman, she is an actress, and she originally meant this to be a TV pilot, but unfortunately it never got picked up, and no one wanted her to play May, which she wanted to do. She wanted to play May, and no one wanted her to because she looked too quote unquote white passing. She didn't look Japanese enough. Um, I'm curious, do you feel this book could work as a television show or movie? And do you kind of feel that it was meant to be something other than a book?
Isn't that just, oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm just still reeling from the fact that she was still not Japanese enough to play a character that she fucking created. Ah, it's almost like she needed to write this book so people would fucking stop being dumb. Okay. Yeah, I think, man, I don't know if it would have worked well. I think it would have worked well as a movie or a TV series, but not in the same way because the way that she wrote this, the nuance of the experiences, and like I was saying, the gross things that happen to all of us that like are just natural part of being human, like the bodily fluids and functions, and then just like I loved it because we all it's it's not it's a polished book without polishing away the things that make us human and have these human experiences. Like my favorite thing, like an example would be when she was taking a bath and she said that she saw a pubic hair and was wondering if it was hers or her sister's. And like and how that kind of gave her a lead way into this thought process that was so beautiful because we've all done stuff like this before, but I don't think a lot of us on our day to day would talk about seeing a pubic hair and then that bringing us into like, oh, I was in the bathtub the other day. Like I have certain friends I do that with, right? That we just say everything no matter what, but I just don't know if that would have come across as strongly as a TV show or a movie. And I think there's probably a way to do it. But I don't know, it's just such a beautiful book. I guess like the grandmother says sometimes in bad things, good things come. So maybe just because it was rejected and then it became a book, it was just such a powerful book because of it. Um, yeah. But I can't believe they wouldn't let her be her own character anyway. I'm gonna seethe over here while I while I listen to
I feel like that's like really funny considering the themes of the book. Like, that's just Hollywood being Hollywood. Like, I don't know. Um, I don't know if the book would lend itself well to being a movie or a TV show, just mainly because of, yeah, the content of the book, the thoughts. Like, I feel like in order for the movie or the TV show to reflect the book, it would have to be like narration heavy or something like that, or a lot of things would have to be changed. Um, because yeah, what made the book so good for me were lines like that, like the pubic hair, like the nudes being the modern way of poetry or something like that. Like just those yeah, they were so real. I don't think it could have been translated that well if it was made into a movie. But yeah,
Yeah, I genuinely want to know like what would the show have looked like or movie if it got a movie instead. Um, and I'm like, how was she writing? Because like, how do you write something this moving and deep and like Grace said earlier, raw, and it was never really meant to be a book, nor do you really consider yourself to be a writer. Um, I don't know. It's so interesting to me sometimes when we get these amazingly beautiful books from people who are not like classically trained authors. They don't have MFAs. They, didn't go to school for creative writing. She's just a girl that like she's an actress and she wanted a TV show and nobody would give it to her, so we got this instead. Happy accidents just always blow my mind, and it's like, God, imagine if we were robbed of this book because it got a TV show instead. Um, so interesting to me. Also, like you guys mentioned, I'm not sure if this would work for me as a show or movie, simply because I think books give space for so much introspection with our characters. And I would say this book is way more character focused than plot focused. Um, so I just don't really know how a character focused TV show would work. We really need to be able to get a glimpse into these characters' minds, and their lives in order to really understand them. And I don't know how that would translate to a television series. Um, but yeah, and also like you guys mentioned, yeah, it's really fucked up that like the author of this story wasn't even going to be allowed to play the character that she wrote for herself. Um, ay, ay, ay. And I believe that it was meant to be like a Brit. I believe the author is British, I think. So I don't know how British television works, but I know in America, even when we are depicting multicultural stories or stories of characters that are not white, we have a certain look that we need for each character to have in order to make them quote unquote believable. And I'm not British, so I have no idea what it's like in Britain. But I guess they have a very similar thing with their media. Uh, Heartbreaking stuff, but happy accident because we got such a great novel and a debut novel at that. Like, wow, good for the author. Okay, well, that wraps up all I have in my notes before we move on to talk about next month's books. Does anyone else have any last minute questions, comments, anything?
I I know we didn't bring it up, but in Yuki's story, they kept talking about her seething anger that she would kind of hold within herself, and I feel like that's like the feminine rage that didn't get a chance to like come out. And I just thought that was a really interesting point that she kept talking about this like seething anger. And I'm like, yeah, girl, you should be angry. Rage, you should rage about it. These men are awful. Anyway, that's just something about Yuki's character that I thought was really interesting.
Okay, going once, going twice. Okay.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I mean like no, going once, going twice, and then sold to the highest bidder. Yeah, I have nothing to add. But yeah, no, that was really the rage was really a nice aspect. I felt like um yeah, I enjoyed reading the
Yeah. And the words of I think it's like Chrissy, it's like he's just a man, hit him with your car, you know? So yeah.
Hopefully by him you mean Alex, of course.
Of course. Every everybody should just run over Alex with their car.
Towards the end of the story, I was like, I really hope there's some way we can kind of like bring Yuki back, but unfortunately, this is not the Seven Moons of Molly Almeida, so poor Yuki. Okay, so for next month, I have two options. They're both books we've looked over before. Um, the first one is going to be Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl. I know, Grace, when I brought this book up, I think like what, 2 or 3 months ago, you had a bit of an interest. So I'll post that link so you both can read that and let me know what you think. And the second one will be Razorblade Tears. I brought this book up, God, probably like a year or so ago now, and there was some interest. It's like a crime thriller, if either one of you are open to thrillers. So there's that link as well. Uh, Read them both. Let me know what you guys think and which one you would prefer to read.
Razorblade Tears seems super interesting. I think I'm leaning towards that one.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll put us down for Razorblade Tears. I will say, this will probably be the only time I will allow us to read a book that is not by a queer author. S.A. Cosby, as far as I could tell, is not queer. But I am curious to see how he depicts queer characters. Um, and I guess I'll ask you guys, are you guys open to that? Reading a book by an author that's not queer, but is about queerness?
Yeah, I am. I was curious, just reading the story. Do you know if someone in his life is queer and he's had to kind of, because it sounds like the story's from a like a straight dad having to deal with the fact that his son was murdered, who's a gay man. So I would just be curious if this author has any um run-ins with that, with like having to come to terms with like someone in his life being queer.
I'm not totally sure. I kind of steered clear of like a lot of the author interviews because I don't want any spoilers
Oh yeah,
before I read it. So
good
I'm
point.
not totally sure. Very good possibility. I mean, we all know someone who's gay, and if you don't know anybody, then you are the gay one. So so very good possibility, but I'm not sure.
I mean, I'd be fine with it and see where it goes. Because the Ali Almeida one, I was just so shocked, but then also not. I still think about, honestly, not daily, but a lot. Sometimes when I see the book on my shelf, and I'm like, that man literally said the exact same thing that that character said, and he was like, "I'm not gay." I just like, I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" But anyway, I do think about that sometimes, and I chuckle, and I'm like, "Whatever you have to tell yourself."
I think about that often too, not because of that, but because when I was originally watching interviews with that author, I assumed he was gay just by the way he carries himself, respectfully. And I was like, I really have to challenge my homophobia because I assumed he was a gay man.
Oh
Maybe
no,
I,
that's
yeah.
I love it. We all love it.
Obviously, I have some internalized things going on that I didn't know I had to deal with, but okay. What about you, Erin? Are you okay with that? Reading a book by an author that's not queer?
I think so. I mean, as long as the subject matter. I mean, I read a ton of yaoi, and shonen ai. A lot of those stuff are made by cis straight women. Uh, as long as the content is, queer, I think I'd be fine with it.
Okay. The reviews I've read have been by queer people, and they've all been pretty positive. So I don't think it's going to be anything offensive. And for that reason, I will allow it. So I'll put us down for this book. Again, like always, last Sunday of the month, which would be, let me check, August 31st. Does that work for folks, or should we perhaps move the day?
It works.
Well, that works for me as well.
Okay. Same time, 12 noon my time, and then whatever time it is for you guys.
Yes. It's
Hmm.
12:15 for now until everyone does the great swip swap, is what I call it. Because my state doesn't change time zones. And so so I'm Pacific time now, and then I'll be Mountain time whenever people does the great swip swap. So
I don't even know when that's coming, but when it does come, I guess we'll meet at 1 o'clock instead of 12.
yeah.
Okay, well, I'll put us down for that. Razorblade Tears on August 31st at noon. Before we sign off, any last minute questions, comments, concerns about this book, next month's book, the club, anything?
None for me. It's all been wonderful, and thanks again for leading it. It's always so much fun. I really enjoy this all the time. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Pretty, pretty much like the entire time I've been this, yeah, pretty much what Grace said. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your kind words. I love praise, so thanks. And you guys always make these things so much fun. I love even the fact that when we have smaller number of attendants for these meetings, they still are very full and fun and lead to a very interesting conversation. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you guys for coming. Your presence, of course, always means as much as my presence. So pat yourselves in the back for that. And with that, I will see you guys hopefully next month. Until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And for you, Arian, enjoy the rest of your Monday, because I know you're in Australia.
Thank
Okay.
you. Matane. I think that's how you, yeah.
Matinee.
Awesome. Bye, y'all.
Bye bye.
Bye.